TRC EDC back again with another knife video. This is a first impressions video of a knife, but also of a mechanism. So this is the CJRB Kicker, and it is the debut for CJRB of this mechanism, the Recoil Lock is what it's called. So the Recoil Lock is a lock that is being used also by Artisan Cutlery, which is the same company as CJRB. CJRB is the budget wing of Artisan Cutlery. But it was developed during the time when the Axis lock by Benchmade was still under patent. That patent has since expired, but this was already in the works, so they went ahead, I guess, and released it anyway. But it wasn't completed for public consumption by the time the Benchmade patent expired. But it was meant to compete with the Benchmade Axis lock while it was still under patent. And it operates, since it was designed that way, it operates actually differently than the Benchmade Axis lock. So another knife, to note here is the SOG Terminus. SOG started using the I forget what they call their lock here, but it's the same as the Axis lock. It just has some buttons on the sides instead of thumb studs on the Axis lock, and so these buttons still actuate what amounts to an Axis lock. This is a little bit different. And by the way, you can operate it by pulling back here or by pulling back on either side of here. And as you can see, it's a collar that goes around, three sides of the knife here. And it still has a pullback action, but it operates differently than the Axis lock. Let's go ahead and take a look at the knife overall. This is a nice 3.5-inch blade. It has sort of a reverse tanto style blade here with slight belly, slight curve over here. It's not flat like a lot of other reverse tantos, notably the Benchmade 940. This is the 9400 actually, but it's still your basic 940. So you can look at the blade here, and the blade styles are very similar. This is just a taller blade. So kind of interesting comparison. But this knife, like I said, is the debut of the Recoil Lock. Kind of an interesting mechanism. There's some good and bad with it. And let's go ahead and talk about the knife. The knife really has the same sort of fit and finish that you would come to expect from CJRB. It has pretty good feeling G10, nice and grippy texture like a lot of their other G10. Got your standard deep carry pocket clip that comes with your CJRB knives. It's got a nice collar here, pivot collar around the pivot. Makes it pretty attractive. It looks like it's probably a brass pivot collar. I don't know that for sure, but that's what it appears to be. But it's sort of a bronze in color. The pivot itself is, your regular CJRB pivot, so it's just a Torx bit. It's not anything fancy. And you've got your T6 Torx bits on the handle here. The steel on this is D2. Which is pretty standard for CJRB, and you get that D2 for a decent price. I think these were running a little bit more expensive than some of the other CJRB knives, which are usually around $35 or $37. I think this was running about $43. This is still a great value for the money because you're getting that fit and finish there at that price, and you really can't argue with that. The grind on this is pretty nice. It's a flat grind, comes to a pretty decent edge. I wouldn't say it's the thinnest edge of all time, but it's definitely not too thick. If I had to compare it to a 940's edge, it feels thinner than the 940's edge, that's for sure. As far as stock goes, let's go ahead and take a stock measurement against the 9400 since I have it out already. And you see basically it's off the same size stock, but there's no swedge that is cut out all the way through. So you're not really having that, you're not really having the weight reduction from the swedge here. So this is a little bit heavier of a knife, just be aware. It's also heavier because it's got stainless steel liners here. I don't believe those liners are really milled out that much. You can see inside, yeah, the liners are pretty much not milled out, other than where the mechanism goes, the spring for the recoil lock here. And like I said, if you pull it back, it will come down just like an axis lock, so you can pull it back. So the pullback option up here actually works a little bit interestingly like the new AD-20 that's out by Andrew Demko. And it's not the same type of mechanism, because I think he patented the shark lock as well, which is what that lock is. But it's a similar action where you're pulling back on something that's on the top of the spine in order for it to come back. You can pull on the sides as well. I will say though that there's some, so the mechanism is kind of fun to use, but it's also not fun to use in some respects. So it's fun to use because you really get that nice swing of the blade, and you can get your fingers out of the way, pull it back. It's not really a problem. It's a lot like the axis lock in that regard. And the axis lock is one of the most fun locks on the market. The drawback to this is the way the detent works. So because because of the way this works with the spring, you'll see that the detent it basically starts right here, right? Okay, and so the problem with the detent starting there is that if you let go of this mechanism before it reaches all the way down, it stops right there, and it doesn't go all the way closed. You have to push it closed. So when you're using it, I found that when you're using the top button here, unless you're really pulling back because there's a lot of tension from the spring, that the natural inclination is not to pull all the way back because the spring is pretty stiff. So you're going to end up having to close it yourself. If you use both fingers to close it, most of the time you'll get it all the way closed as long as you have everything going, because you'll have enough pressure on the lock bar. But the natural inclination is to let go a little bit before that happens, and then it gets stuck like this and doesn't close. So, well, in theory, I would really like this locking mechanism. In practice, it takes some getting used to. I suppose over time I could get used to it, but it's not so intuitive right off the bat that you're going to have it hitting exactly every single time. I think for most people anyway. See, just like that. So I do think that might be an issue. Perhaps reducing the tension on the spring here would help. Sorry about that, hit the camera. Perhaps reducing the tension on the spring would help, but I think that is an issue. Another issue with this is the blade feels to be angled a little bit upward. I wish it was sort of straighter out here, maybe, going this way a little bit. I think it would help with certain types of cuts. The ergonomics on this are pretty good, but not amazing. And you still have this lock to attend to, which I think gets in the way of the ergonomics of your thumb. Because my thumb wants to go here, or here, or here, and anywhere I put it, I'm ending up on this, this upward hump right here. So I think the lack of a real thumb ramp is a problem. I also think that, look, you're sort of tempted to pull this back with your thumb, and if you do, just be aware that, you have that springy detent and you don't want to close it on your fingers. I think that's pretty much it for a first impression. This was sort of a disorganized review, but I was just organically letting some of these thoughts come to me as I went through this, so that you guys can get an organic first impressions of this knife. The locking mechanism really is interesting, but I don't think it's as good as the axis lock. The axis lock is, well, it's not just a little better. It's way better than this mechanism. But I do think, this can be a fun mechanism. The other thing is it doesn't really work to, that is another thing. It doesn't work, like the axis lock, you can pull back and flick the knife out, right? Flick it open, flick it closed, right? With this one, you can't, it doesn't flick out, which is really annoying. You really have to use the flipper tab in order to get it out, and then use this to get it back in. And you know, one of the other issues is when I pull back on here, it's intuitive, but I actually have to move the knife up in order to get up to here. You know, I'm sure someone with bigger hands, I have size large hands, so some of the XL hands might not have that problem. But for me, I've got to sort of reposition my hands every time I want to use this lock. That's annoying as well. Anyway, those are my first impressions. If you haven't checked out this knife, go ahead and check it out. This will probably be a giveaway knife at some point. Not in this video, but it will probably be a giveaway knife on the channel. So if you like this knife, stay tuned because it will probably be a giveaway knife. Thank you so much.